live and streaming from the old cell phone instead. Hope you'll be able to pick back up with over here. So let's go ahead and get flipped back over so you guys can watch what I'm looking at right now. We'll go and get started on the Rostov nuclear power plant again, because that's kind of where things went horrifically awry, I should say. Let's see, I'm going to set this down for a second because I see that my message is just getting through. I think this is hilarious. I typed that in. It's still just barely chunking into the queue just now. So if you get to see that, okay. All right, so we're back on the Rostov nuclear power plant here. Basically, I saw the report the other day that there was impact or some kind of a failure of one of the power units at the Rostov nuclear power plant. And now there's reports that there was a radiation release from that same plant. This is information I've seen from multiple sources now, but I do not have a good feel for the accuracy of this information. Basically, I've not been able to get this confirmed in a way that I can absolutely state that this is accurate. So, overall, the situation as they're reporting is there was a release of radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere with radioactive activity of up to 1.5 million curies. The radioactive cloud is moving inland towards Saratov. According to Rosatom, the radioactive background in Rostov is normal, but in fact it has already exceeded the norm by 75 times. The Russian government is carefully hiding this. It is this accident that is associated with the problems with the energy supply of the south of Russia and the annexed Crimea. There has been a lot of power issues in Crimea and southern Russia. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just pop ahead and we'll go through some of that right now. For instance, there have been protests going on in Krasnodar, in this case in the village of, I don't remember the name of it right now. I'll get to it in a moment here. But the mayor of the town is basically saying, I will not leave you, the protesters, here until the power has been restored. I will sit down with the management company. We'll be together with you. You can even handcuff me to a pole if you want to. But there have been several demonstrations over there. Russian telegram channels report that in Krasnodar, people started blocking roads because of the power outages. In some residential areas, there's no light or water for over 24 hours. And the police, by the way, have been arresting people in the latest information that I have received. In Anapa, Russia, locals are also blocked the road due to power and water outages. In some neighborhoods, there's been no electricity for 3 days. The protesters have been allowing ambulances through. Crimea, on the other hand, has been having electricity shutdowns scheduled in the peninsula, including in Alushta, Belogorsk, Pretoria, Kerch, Armyansk, Sakis, Simferopol, Sudak, Feodosia, and Yalta. The lights will be alternately turned off for 2 to 3 hours. The schedules were introduced due to abnormal heat and increased loads on the energy system of southern Russia, following an emergency at the Rostov nuclear power plant. Now, again, the Rostov nuclear power plant is featuring prominently in this situation. So there's the possibility that radiation release report is accurate. But again, I just don't have a good feel for it as for whether it's accurate or not. Some more pictures of the protests in Krasnodar. Again, this is unusual for Russia to have this many people up in arms about the situation. From the insider, people in Anapa came out to protest against power outages. They were immediately sent a replacement transformer. But if they're having other power outages, say some from a nuclear power plant that's down, then maybe that transformer is not going to do them any good. So a lot of this is repeated information on this situation in Krasnodar and Anapa. So interesting to say the least. Russians vacationing in Turkey were poisoned by an unknown gas at the Sea Light Resort in Kusadasi. This is the case when it is better to vacation at home in the swamps, as he says. Again, this is an interesting story. It's coming from a couple of different sources. Interesting that it seems that Russians are not very popular across the world right now. I can't imagine why. The resort season in Crimea is in full swing. Russians are massively canceling their tours. The situation in the territory of the temporarily occupied Crimea has caused the massive cancellation of tours for illegal recreation at the resorts of the peninsula. We're kind of seeing this overall in the situation in Crimea. Then there was this successful strike on a Russian military base in Donetsk, as looks like this facility right here has been used for this purpose for a while, and the strike seems to have been accurately placed. However, there is a protest outside the U.S. Embassy that's in Moscow, Russia. Notice that they've got this big projection screen, a slickly produced video. There's flags for everybody, and the flag right there is being projected against the building, the Russian flag projected against the U.S. Embassy building. This looks about as spontaneous as looks about as spontaneous as about any organized government anything that you would ever find. So it looks like it was set up by Russian government sources. A study has emerged on the number and direction of immigration from Russia in 2022 to 2024. So here's the details. The study conducted by the Russian The Bell newspaper has shown that at least 650,000 people have left Russia since the war in Ukraine began. The figures were obtained by analyzing statistics from each of the accepting countries. Not all countries reveal their statistics, of course. Russia itself has not disclosed how many people left the country after February 24, 2022. Those who left were people who avoided mobilization, repression, and sanctions. So where did they go to? Let's see. I think they've got a map here. Jump on it in here. Canada got 11,700. The U.S. got 48,000. The U.K. 15,000. Spain 16,000. The Netherlands 11,000. Germany 36,000. Serbia 30,000. Turkey 28,000. Israel got 80,000. That one was a surprise to me, but I suppose it shouldn't be. Georgia got 73,000. Armenia picked up a whopping 110,000. Kazakhstan got 80,000 of them. Kyrgyzstan, 12,000. And South Korea, of all places, 19,805. So that's where the Russians, when they fled the regime in Moscow, they went all over the world. Oh, I missed Argentina, 11,000 right there. That's a graphic from The Bell. Now, this one I want to share because it is a round of disinformation that's coming up. The Russians put out this video right here showing a man in what appears to be a Ukrainian police officer's uniform deliberately bloodying up a doctor in scrubs. Now, if you watch the video of Okhmedit's Children's Hospital being destroyed and the aftermath of it, there was a doctor who had close to that haircut and wearing scrubs like similar to these. But there are a lot of errors in this video. There's seams where there aren't supposed to be seams. The colors are off. The haircut's wrong. And the officer there that's doing this setting up, his entire utility belt is missing. So there's many indications that this is a Russian disinformation campaign in the offing here. They tried to pull the wool over people's eyes, saying that no, it wasn't Russia that destroyed the children's hospital. It was all disinformation campaign by Ukraine. But when you really analyze things, you see exactly what the truth of it is. The entire town of Alushta, Crimea, has lost power. That was on July 19th, so this would be as of today. They were probably sitting in the dark. Again, we seem to be having a lot of power issues over in Russia, which seems kind of odd because they've been trying to put Ukraine in the dark. Aussie says the lines of Russians queuing for a U.S. visa is larger than that crowd. Exactly. Yes, indeed. They really want to be in the United States. Warriors of the 1,307th Russian Regiment say that old, untrained Russians often come to serve in their rank. Many come simply to die at a higher cost, while others are forced by their wives. They say at least you will be of some use. This really does not sound like a highly motivated army, as Dmitry at War Translated states. And this is the overall situation that Russia's been pulling off. They don't have the time to properly train their troops before sending them into the field. They've been trying to get in the point where they can, but even now they are not able to truly get that level of timing available to them to do so. From The Economist, Russia's vast stocks of Soviet-era weaponry are running out. And this article is pretty short, actually, even before it was behind the paywall there. But it's pretty clear from all reports, from open source reports, that Russia's running low on their Soviet-era stockpile. That doesn't mean they're going to run out of things tomorrow or next week or next month. They're just starting to dig even deeper and deeper into worse and worse equipment to try and keep things going on the front lines. Now, Russia can still produce a certain amount of equipment. That they will never, as I say, be out of tanks because they'll still be producing new ones. But in the end, they're going to run out of their bottomless supply of things to throw at Ukraine. According to Dmitry at War Translated, the Russians have noted issues in drone productions and now state that for every one Russian FPV drone, there are up to 10 Ukrainian ones. A lot of this war is being prosecuted by drones, and the Russians are not keeping up on that side. The Nord Oil motor plant is burning down in Taldom, Moscow region. This is one of yet another fire that's been taking place in that area. Seems like a lot of vital military infrastructure is getting burned down. Of course, this one was particularly funny to me. Partisans burned down a factory in Volgograd that was reported to have been producing black body bags for corpses of Russian soldiers. I thought that was a particularly fitting way for that to go. Excuse me. 5 IL-76 MD-90A aircraft used by the Russian airborne paratroopers grounded after incidents due to faulty ball bearings in the landing gear assembly supplied by Balashivka Mechanical Plant, which sourced the ball bearings from unknown manufacturers, then forged the paperwork. This is more of that vaunted Russian corruption coming back to bite Russia's military in the butt. A year after the destruction of this, already mentioned this one earlier, so I can skip past that. See, I already talked about that. Now the next interesting tidbit from Tyndar: no matter whether you find logistics in war interesting or boring, it is one of the decisive, if not the decisive, element in war next to dedication, morale, and political wit. Russia severely lacks in all of those components and tries to balance this out with pure Russian meat. Russia also lacks, excuse me, sorry about that. Russia also lacks in the latter, but this is another story. What is crucial in this post, however, is that too many were focused on ammunition and production. That's certainly important, but it's just one piece of a long chain. If you have a lot of ammunition, then gun barrels and their wear are the next headache. We already know that Russians are emptying their stockpiles only to cannibalize gun barrels due to their lack of producing capacity of new barrels. And now he talks about some of the numbers about this. Russia currently is able to produce between 100 and 200 barrels per year, and yet they are going through at a rate of 30,000, 50,000 rounds a day, 10 to 16 barrels a day without any further interference. Now, the Ukrainians shooting at them, blowing up their howitzers and things like that, before we even worry about that. They're losing 10 to 16 barrels a day off of their equipment in just the wear and tear. Now they'll probably run them long past that, typical for Russian, that is. But at the rate they can produce them, they cannot keep up with their current rate of burn. Conversely, the UK government and the British defense industry are stepping up their support by, in particular, producing new barrels for the AS-90 SPG. This is really well timed because Russia's reports of severe lack of capability of barrel production have been coming to light. Now, I did a little bit more research on this, so apparently Russia has never made their own machine tools to make barrels. Before World War II, they basically bought equipment from the West, or they, at the time that the end of World War II came around, they stole it from Germany. Then if they have any new equipment to do it, it is coming from the West again. In fact, I believe the last piece of similar equipment that could turn out a barrel was bought in 2018. But that means that they've got two facilities that can each produce around 100 barrels a year, much of it with ancient or legacy equipment that's been out of service or production for decades. So that's the reason why Russia is suffering so much on the barrel front. You might even say they've got themselves over a barrel. Moving on from Knoll reports, an investigation in Poland has started following the discovery that parts made in Poznan were found in Iranian Shahed 136 kamikaze drones used by Russia against Ukraine. The state-owned Watwarnia Spritz, I'm not even going to try. I've not had enough practice on Polish names, so I'm just going to keep on moving. They sold fuel pumps to Iran Motor Sazan for agricultural tractors, but these parts ended up in Iranian military drone factories and were subsequently purchased by Russia. So they're doing their investigation into this little bit here. Now, Ozzy talking about the barrels there. Those barrel numbers also include tank barrels. So the choice is to make them for artillery or for new tanks. Exactly. It's amongst the many issues that Russia is facing right now. The U.S. is planning to up the production of Patriot defense missiles at Japanese. They've also planned to do it at Japanese factories. However, they've got shortages of crucial components made by Boeing. Now, Boeing's been in a lot of trouble lately. They've been some of their whistleblowers have turned up oddly room temperature. I'm going to put it that way very carefully. So Boeing's got a few things they're working out, and therefore I'm not sure that they will be able to jump up their component production for this. But still, in the end, there's always a crink in the supply chain somewhere. Now, this little bit of information. Well, let me jump ahead just in talk here. Ukraine has reportedly cut off. Wow. I got a tickly throat, so bear with me. Ukraine has cut off the transit of Russian oil through their country to Hungary. So now Hungary is facing a fuel crisis as Ukraine has cut off Russian oil supplies. And the question is, why has this NATO country not found an alternative to the Russian oil? That's because Hungary likes their Russian oil. They're very much in Russia's orbit these days. Now, speaking of Viktor Orban for a few minutes there, he's going to, quote, continue his peace mission despite criticism from the European Union, and that peace mission is necessary to stop the war from spreading. Now, he then added, in his view, it is not necessary to talk to the parties, but to tell them that the whole world wants peace because this war is bad for everyone, and that the world powers are waiting for peace talks to begin. Then he's trying to change Europe's stance. I notice I never see anything about Orban trying to change Putin's stance. Just saying. The United Kingdom's new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has announced a crackdown on Russia's so-called shadow fleet of oil tankers used to skirt international sanctions. This is to disrupt around 600 vessels, which the West says are used by Moscow to transport about 1.7 million barrels of oil per day. So these sanctions should have additional effects on Russia's little oil selling schemes. Moving outside of Ukraine for just a moment, though, I still contend this is related. Serbian propaganda says that Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina are preparing for a war against Serbia. In fact, it's the Serbian government that is preparing for another escalation in the Balkans. And this year, American intelligence warned about new escalations in the region. Serbia has been trying to create something happening there. And I suspect, honestly, that they're being pushed by Moscow to do something to destabilize the region, to take the focus off giving aid to Ukraine. As Ivana Strodner states, Serbia's announced pivot towards the European Union is not true. They're still a close ally to Russia and China. They only need the EU for their money. Sure, there's plenty of other people that need your money too. And once again, about the Hungarian oil situation, the blocking of oil deliveries by Ukraine poses a serious threat that we can only manage in the short term. We told the Ukrainian authorities that this is an incomprehensible and unfriendly decision on their part. Well, maybe they ought to tell their buddy Orban and Putin to stop invading Ukraine so that oil can continue to transit. In occupied Luhansk, now we're onto the front lines here, by the way. In occupied Luhansk, 4 explosions were heard, possibly targeting a helicopter base. Russian media reported that the Luhansk Higher Military Aviation School of Navigators might have been attacked. So this is actually from just yesterday, and I think I might have more on that later, but I don't know for sure. Oh, in fact, here it is. Satellite images show the aftermath of the missile strike on Luhansk. It's unclear exactly what burned besides fields, but such areas typically house air defense systems. This is likely to try and take out air defense systems in preparation for F-16s. From the Defense Intelligence Update of the UK, Russia continues offensive operations on several areas of the front line, likely focusing on Avdiivka and Pokrovsk sector in Donetsk Oblast. That's where their main efforts are taking place. They've made minor advances into the town of New York, which was a heavily fortified area. And Chasiv Yar, they note that there's been no significant changes in territorial control. Now, Chasiv Yar has been an area of focus by the Russians. The fact that they are kind of pulling back their operational scale there should indicate that they have been having some trouble keeping up the pace. However, that doesn't mean all is well, because in Donetsk region, the Russian army is advancing to the most important highway between Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka. Cutting the highway means huge losses in logistics for the Ukrainian armed forces, as it is the only way near the front line. They do have the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade Magura holding these lines, and a lot of Bradley infantry fighting vehicles in the area. They then brag up some of their exploits in pushing the Russians back. Already talked about the Su-25 earlier. Now from the deep state map, I've not used it in a while, so bear with me a bit here. They claim that Russia has occupied Prores, which is outside of Otratina, or Avdiivka. So that'd be right here on this little corner here. Let me get that kind of pushed in. Come on, focus. There we go. Right here. There's Ochoratina. There's Avdiivka right there to give you a little bit of a reference. An advance in Krasnohorivka, Pishane, near Luvatse, Novo-Oleksandrivka, etc. So there have been some areas of small advances by the Russian troops. Again, it's just meant to be a steady pace on taking on more and more of Ukrainian territory. Now, this is War Gonzo. This is the Russian source, pretty much confirming what I just mentioned right here. No need to really, you can see right there, Chasiv Yar without any significant changes, etc. Kharkiv, the activity does not decrease, but there's no particular results he reports. From Novoselivka, Persia, the geolocated footage confirms further advance inside the town. That'll be right there. And Ukraine controls the southern part with heavy fighting ongoing. Now, on Chasiv Yar, since the Russians have not been able to push directly into Chasiv Yar itself, they're trying to basically widen the front line there. And they can't create the bridgehead they want to do, but they're trying to work on whatever they can do. The bridgehead would be across this little water feature right here, and they can't seem to get across it and get a good solid state there. That's the reason why they're pushing further north to try and take other pieces of territory. And that's pretty much the front lines today. Now, let's go ahead and move on to Yemen for a moment or two. It's kind of would normally be in the international front here, but this is so different, I guess you might say. I wanted to separate it out to right before the interesting extras. The Israeli Defense Forces confirmed that Israeli fighter jets attacked Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, a little bit of context here. There was a drone attack on Tel Aviv sponsored by the Houthis in Yemen. And, well, that did not sit well with Israel. So Israel packed up their fighter jets and ran down to Yemen and bombed a Houthi oil refinery and a harbor there, which I think, yeah, there we go. There's a nice slick little animation there. Al Hudaida oil terminal. This is what they attacked and managed to effectively destroy. And you'll see what I mean by that when we get there, because there's some pretty good video of it. That's a still shot of it. Even the Houthis got in on the providing evidence portion of it. This is the fire of the port facility there, that oil terminal. Quite impressive, visually speaking. Now, Al Arabiya has said that the attack on the Al Hudaida port in Yemen was carried out jointly by Israel, the U.S., and UK. The claims that 12 Israeli aircraft, including F-35s, participated in this attack. I find this eminently believable as a possibility. There's been no reports of actual U.S. aircraft involved, but I could easily see the U.S. providing intelligence, coordination, etc. Things are heating up in the Middle East, and we don't know where it's going to lead. Let's go ahead and pop into the interesting extras here. And I am coming up towards the end of things, so here's the Tel Aviv drone attack that I mentioned that was sponsored by the Houthis in Yemen. So this did not come out of nowhere, just to be absolutely clear. I think the Israelis were happy to ignore the Yemeni Houthis until they decided to make it their business. Now, Bangladesh has been offline for about 48 hours after authorities imposed a nation-scale internet shutdown in a bid to quell student protests. This, of course, keeps the human rights observers and independent media from actually seeing what's going on. I have not been able to find out, because I haven't had a chance to look in detail, what's going on in Bangladesh, why the students are protesting. In fact, well, you know what, let's just do this. I'll try and prop this up here so it can Bangladesh student protest 24. Bangladesh student protests over jobs escalate and telecoms are disrupted. Now, this is all Al Jazeera, so take this with a grain of salt. As always, says dozens of people have been killed in Bangladesh as nationwide student protests over the allocation of civil service jobs took an increasingly violent turn. So they're complaining about the allocation of public jobs. Interesting to say the least. Now, this is another bit of Russian disinformation. The Russians claim that this was a Ukrainian soldier killing a Ukrainian soldier who had asked to have their life ended. I'll put it that way. But when they did a close analysis of the video, the man was wearing a pair of underwear that you can just see the logo of that's only sold in Russia. It's not sold in Ukraine at all. So interesting that it's always amazing to me how much people dig in and find out how much disinformation the Russians have been putting out. Now, you couldn't be online without noticing this the other day. I thought this was a great joke, just because I thought it was funny. For one thing, this is not true because the fridge does not run Windows. They said they couldn't open their fridge because it had crashed. Well, what happened is that CrowdStrike actually put out a bad update, and CrowdStrike is a anti-malware, anti-intrusion software that's run in the cloud for many business customers. This is overall what ended up happening is the bad update was sent out. It caused the computers to go into a boot loop of blue screen. In order to fix it, you have to get in a safe mode and delete a specific file. I'm not going to get into the technicals of that. But the long story short is that all the people who were involved in this CrowdStrike, this online service that was supposed to prevent malware, were struck by effectively the worst possible malware from a trusted source. And we're going to end off today with this cafe has developed a sensor whose door only opens to people who smile. And this person claims that this should happen all over the world. And I'm going to just state straight up, I don't like this at all. But somebody said, this will never catch on in Finland. There are many places where smiles might be hard to come by. So I can absolutely understand why that might not catch on in many places of the world. But that's everything for today. Thank you for suffering along with me as the technical issues managed to overtake the entire stream. As always, I try to have a backup plan in play. And today we got all the way to the backup of the backup. So thank you again. I'll make sure that we're all fixed up for the next stream and try to make sure that the internet connection and the laptop and everything's working in better order. Now, Ozzy stated the descendants of veterans on the War of Independence 1972 got 30% of government jobs reserved. I think that's out of Bangladesh. So that's interesting, and I didn't know that. So very always exciting to find out new things. And Ozzy, I thank you very much for that. Al, always glad to have you here. And Jerry and Lucille, always glad as well. I appreciate all of you, Luciano, and everybody who tunes in. You really make the stream better, even when things go extremely badly on my end. So on that note, you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.